Welcome to episode 2 of Voice of Women Live with Shirley at Menopause Coach. I am so excited to be doing this live. I'm just going to try and invite Shirley in. Hi, Shirley! Yay!
Am I in?
That was so effortless. I can't
Really?
believe it. Smooth as anything.
Well, I've got, as long as you can see me, because at the moment you're just a whirring circle and I've got a big thing over my face, but that's
am I?
fine.
Oh, hold on. Let me try and...
No, it's probably not you. It'll just be my phone. Don't worry about it.
Oh.
As long as you can hear and see me.
Can you see yourself?
No, I got this stupid go live with K.Y.K. Every time I click on it, it won't go away. But anyway, it's fine. I'm loath to click anything else because if you can see, then that's good.
Would you like to start with giving a little bit? They're saying we're clear, so that's good. Would you like to start with giving a little introduction of yourself?
Yeah, so I call myself the Menopause Anxiety Coach, which came about kind of partly because of lockdown when I, like everybody else, was wondering what to do and stuck at home. Thought, I suppose I better relearn all the digital skills that I'd learned in previous iterations, and spoke to a virtual group of women and just randomly thought, okay, what do I do? I'll put together something I think I might know about. It was about midlife, and I spoke to this group of women and said, hey, I'm thinking of putting this program together. What do you think? Mm-hmm. And a few of them put their hands up, and I thought, oh, interesting. So then I started running webinars, and more women I could tell were really resonating with, and really all I did was share my story of what retrospectively happened to me in my 50s, which with hindsight was
so much can come from just sharing our stories.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So obviously with the kind of like conversations that you've been having, you were telling me about your like background in advertising and how like you'd started in your journey of advertising, and I was just wondering if you could tell me like a little bit more about like how that affected your identity and your like feeling of self-identity and purpose within yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first role I got into, and I really wanted to work in advertising. But I may have missed this out when we spoke before, but what was really weird is when I was a kid, I had two older brothers. I was my next brother was 7 years older, and my brother used to take the mick out of me because he would catch me in the kitchen pretending to do margarine ads, because I'd heard them I'd be in the kitchen spreading things. So early on I had this thing about advertising. I didn't really know why, but I did. And what fascinated me when I got into that world, and why I was really switched on by it, was really being fascinated about the psychology of it, and at first really excited by how you could use words and images to persuade people to take action in a way that you could just say do this, and people would just ignore it. But if you picked the right images and you used the right words and you created the right typography, then you could just transform a message and make a real difference. And for a long time that really excited me. Until it didn't. Until it didn't.
Basically.
Yeah.
And I suppose that must have been quite difficult as well. Like if you were like had that thing from being younger, like identifying with that and thinking like that's what you wanted to do, to then get into that corporate world to actually not feel that level of satisfaction and level of like purpose and like identifying with that must have been quite difficult.
I think what happened was, so the other thing I wanted to be as a child, and I think we had the whole kind of acting this out thing. I thought I wanted to be an actress, but actually discovered I was terrified standing on a stage, so that was not going to happen. But the reason I fell out of love with it, and I was in love with it for a while, was that, and this is quite common, that I began to feel that it was superficial, that it had no real purpose or meaning, that we were being asked to persuade people to do things for companies that we didn't really believe in. You know, I'm talking about it, and this is just about personal values, but I was working for people that were in the defense sector, you know, or making things that I didn't ethically approve of, and that felt deeply uncomfortable. I liked the work, but I didn't like who I was doing it for. And so that began to create that disenchantment that I thought would be better if I worked in places like charities or or more socially responsible places, or the NHS or something like that. I felt like it would have more purpose, and that wasn't true either.
No. No. Why was that not true for you?
Well, it's a lovely myth. It's a bit like, you know, my favourite book when I was a child. So much of this goes back to childhood. My favourite book was about fairy tales, and it was this big, fat, purple, hard-bound book, and I adored it. But the thing with fairy tales is you kind of blur all the edges, and it's all kind of this lovely, silky imagination of it all being gloriously beautiful and happy and fulfilling. And actually, charities and the NHS have just as many shitty things going on as any other business. Because
it's a business at the end of the day, right?
yeah, exactly. So they work on the same lines, the same structures, the same motivations, and you know, and lots of people kind of gravitate like migrants, you know, leaving a war zone of corporate world, thinking, I'll be saved and rescued if I work in this charity or in the NHS. It's not true. It doesn't happen.
So how did your sense of freedom and reward change when you felt as if you started following your purpose to now being where you are now, working as a menopause coach?
Oh, crikey, it's been slow, but I think the changes, I mean, it just all sounds very cliched, and lots of people say this, but it is, and you know, it's what I most admire in you, figuring this out so early on. I mean, I really do, because it is about trusting that who you are and what you're about and what you've got to say and what skills you bring, that you can validate them, that just because you don't get some external validation from a boss, an employer,
it's hard.
Doesn't mean they're not valid, that actually when you can be okay with that. And it was writing a book proposal that the penny really dropped for me with that.
And you did that. We can go back into that again, because I love that when you were saying that about your that kind of change from you being like, what do they want, and actually switching that to what do I want to say was so powerful.
And it was, I think that is a really pivotal moment, because it kind of encapsulated how I had been living most of my life, and I still have to wrestle with it.
Of course.
And I think certainly most women, and lots of men too, do the same thing, that we're so driven to what do you want, you know, what will make me popular, what will make people like me,
what do they want,
what will make people approve of me, what will make people give me the job, what will make people give me the business, what do I have to say, how do I have to look, does this saucepan look good like this, you know? And letting go of that and going, do you know what, just F that, I'm not.
But I suppose it goes back to what you're saying as being a child, and like when you're a child you're constantly looking for that validation to know how you should act. Is this good? Is this good? Well, what kind of response do I get if I act like that? And I think as we go through life, we can take away the impact that our childhood and the little children that we have within us all. And I think another thing that you were mentioning, one about the tectonic plates, I love that, your explanation of that, but also with you and talking about your son and being a mother, and actually we're taught so much that should give, as women, that should give us a great identity, but that isn't all we are, and as women we're so much more than just giving birth to a child. Do you maybe want to talk a little bit more about that, and actually as mothers we can want more than that, but also it's okay if that is our goal as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because not specifically, I guess, in relation to my son, although he'll probably go, "Oh God, mother, stop it!" But, you know, because he's like, do not use images of me. Who said you could do that? But I think there are real parallels. I had a conversation the other day with someone between when women have children and when women hit menopause, and it is outrageous that if you work for somebody else and you're fully competent, you're operating at a high level, you're juggling plates, spinning balls, managing this, managing that, being incredible, and then you go, "Oh, by the way, do you mind if I do this for 4 days now, because I'd kind of like to spend a bit more time with my family and balance that out a bit."
And getting no credit for what you've been doing all this time.
Oh, no. All of a sudden it's like, "Well, listen, love, well, if you come back, you've got to take a demotion." I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Did I hear that right? It's like, no, I just asked to work 4 hours instead of 5. I didn't say I'd had a frontal lobotomy or part of my brain removed, or that I wouldn't actually be capable of thinking the same way. And the same thing happens to women at menopause, that because of what's going on in our bodies, if we're in the workplace and we have a career that we want to maintain for lots of good reasons, either because we love it or for very mercenary reasons, like, "Oh shit, the clock is counting down and I'm going to retire in X number of years and I need an income to support me and my family." But the same argument applies, like, "Oh, well, if you can't do this anymore, yes, you can stay, but you have to work at a lower level." I just think that's outrageous.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a slight detour with the parental thing. I think it's the way I saw it, and if my son sees this, it'd be so fascinating. He doesn't follow me. We're fine. I am most definitely not the perfect mother, and I sure as hell didn't.
Who is perfect at anything? I always say this: no one's perfect, or we all are.
Yeah, you're right. You are so right. So I did things like I do in most of my life, a little bit differently to the way maybe a lot of other women do. I didn't do the whole ferry him here, ferry him there, ferry him, "Oh God, I must take him to this, must take him to that, or he's going to be out late, I'll pick him up." I just kind of was very, "Well, you want to do it? Have you worked out how you're going to get home?"
I love that.
Yeah. And if he hadn't, then he wasn't going. Well, okay, never mind. Because and I know that's just like one little example, but I feel with children the same as with people, like people you work with, people you're in business with. You've got to let them grow at their pace as well. You've got to sometimes, you're constantly renegotiating terms, if you like.
Yeah.
Like 1 minute they're in one place and then suddenly there's a jarring, and this does partly fit with my tectonic plates, which I'll come to in a minute.
Yeah.
But it certainly happened with my son. So we'd be getting on fine, and then all of a sudden it's like, ooh, something's changed. And I thought I had to take myself in hand and go, "Oh, what's changed? What's changed is he's developed, he's grown, he's figured out more than he had before. So I have to step up again."
Which is so tricky for a mother, and I think that's so underrated. Like, I see how my mum deals with that as well, with me getting older, and it's like so hard to let go of like your baby like that as well, on top of everything else.
I mean, I'm sure sometimes he'd rather I'd been a typical, "Here, come darling, let me make you toast and cake." But he didn't get that. He got let's do this mad thing called entrepreneurship and F it up and start again, and F it up and start again, which is what he's done, but he's not messed it up. He's doing pretty well. So the tectonic plates that you mentioned, for people that are thinking, what
the heck are these tectonic plates?
Yeah. The way I was describing them was related to menopause and midlife, about how, for me, menopause can be this golden opportunity, but it is a real slap in the face. It's a real kind of Like, it's doing, and you think, oh my God, stop hitting me. And you've been living your life a certain way for a long time, so you kind of feel like you're on solid ground. And even if it's not fulfilling you completely, and it's not exactly what you want, you know, you've kind of mastered the art of going with the flow. Yeah, this is how I roll, you know. And you're almost willing, well, not almost, a lot of people do, to sacrifice, you know, all of those dreams you had when you were younger. It's like, oh well, yeah, I was young then.
Yeah, it's easier to do that as well, isn't it?
Yeah. But what menopause can do is it kind of forces you to make a choice, and that way that you've always been, because this isn't for all women, but the statistic that surprised you was that more than half, 54% of women struggle with menopause anxiety. So not just menopause.
Yeah, let's go into that too, because that's so important and you know so much about.
Yeah, so when you have menopause anxiety, your head's spinning the whole time, you're overthinking everything, you're in overwhelm, you can't think straight, you can't concentrate, you're having panic attacks, mood swings, irritability, up, you're down, you're crying, you're laughing. I mean, it's just insane.
And you're not given the space either, I could imagine, to actually be able to have that time and not feel as if you still need to be juggling everything like you were before, right?
Precisely, which is why the external world and you buy into it, start to, you know, I think it comes from us. We start to, the self-doubt creeps in. And this is what happened to me, you know. It felt like a very rapid decline from uber self-confidence, and oh, look at me, I can do this, to completely crashing into a sense of utter incompetence. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I clearly couldn't be trusted. And I share with you how I ended up, I moved from working for myself on 5-figure months, income months, into persuading myself that, oh, if I just do a small job, no pressure, no stress, that'll be okay. I'll settle for that, then I'll be fine. So I took a minimum wage job, and it didn't make a blind bit of difference. I still felt incompetent.
Yeah.
I didn't trust myself to put cakes in boxes.
And you're making coffees around you, tell me about that.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, it just was just as stressful as anything I'd ever done. So that was wrong.
Because it's your mindset it's not what you're doing, is it? It's the inside that's creating the outside to be perceived in that way.
Completely. And it's understandable that you feel incompetent, but it all kind of tied up with that book proposal. And so these tectonic plates, the way I described it was, if you imagine that you got 2 feet, you think you're on solid ground, one tectonic plate is the life you've lived till now and the way you've lived it. And then the other tectonic plate is this new version of you that's waiting for you to either step into and expand into and explore, even though you have no idea where the hell it's going. And I described it as a tectonic plates kind of slowly, in fact, or quickly moving apart, and you've got one leg on one and one on the other, and you have to choose. Like, you cannot continue, you know, that just amplifies the anxiety and the struggle, and you will have to choose. And but the saving grace is I chose once, it doesn't mean you've chosen forever. You can change.
Yeah.
So I did initially choose what seemed like the easy path. Oh, I'll work in a deli for minimum wage, thinking that would be okay. And then changed and thought, oh, hang on a minute, I was wrong. So I did switch into.
You're jumping between both the plates now.
Yeah. So, Superwoman. But I think that analogy is quite powerful, because it kind of gets you to think it is like you're being pulled apart. And you know, I kind of partly embrace this and partly hate it, you know, when we go, we have to make that choice. No one can make that for us. And that
can be very scary, but very empowering actually as well, when you realise that your future and how you want it to be is in your control.
Yeah. And it's both of those, and it's incredibly scary.
Equally.
Yeah. and I was scared, and I still get scared. Like this week I've been feeling kind of, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
So it doesn't entirely go away, but now I have, a 99% confidence level that, yeah, it's just this week. I'll be fine next
Yeah.
week. Whereas when I was in the middle of it, and this is what many women feel, it's like, you don't think there's any end to it. You're in this endless dark tunnel, and you're not sure where the end of the tunnel is, if the end of the tunnel exists, what's at the other end of the tunnel. So saying to you, oh, you just choose.
Yeah, it's definitely not as simple as that.
No.
And I think as well what we were speaking about is that kind of like with that separation, it's kind of that choice as well of trying to keep up that facade of identity that we all try and like portray ourselves in a certain way, instead of and thinking, oh, I'm losing my purpose and I'm losing my self-identity. But actually we were kind of having that discussion as well, then if that's the case, had you really found it, or were you just identifying with something that wasn't your truth and wasn't from like that place of like honesty? Or it's that thing again, going back to being that little child trying to perform and trying to fit in these boxes that society and the people around you and even you want to try and fit in because it makes your life easier. Like it's hard to sometimes, and very vulnerable, to make that decision to like be your true self instead of trying to fit in a box that everyone's going to applaud you for, right?
Yeah, and I think because you've been in that box for so long and you functioned fairly well within it.
Exactly. And you build your world around you up with those with that mindset, right?
Exactly. And it's like if you try to rationalize your way out of it on your own, this is how it was for me, it's like being locked in a room with a lunatic, and you're trying to reason with this lunatic, but you can't escape the room, and you keep having this conversation which keeps going in the same direction, and it doesn't matter which way you turn, you're still stuck in the same flipping room with the lunatic,
which creates anxiety.
Right? Sure does. So in my case, and I think in a lot of women's cases, because I was never good, still not actually, at asking, going, hands up, okay, I need some help here. I think I might be drowning.
Because we think we're strong and we want to be strong and we want to, again, live up to that identity of I can do this, I'm not weak, I'm not vulnerable. But that doesn't make us weak or vulnerable. It's just something that we all need sometimes.
Well, exactly. But and also we take on the role quite frequently of problem solvers, either at work or at home. We're the ones that often people turn to for the answer. And even when we've got no bloody idea what the answer is, well, maybe it's just me, we still try to come up with something. I don't know what it is, like we're driven to, well, let me see. And instead of saying, I have no idea, why don't you Google it? Which I am more prone to say now, but I would Google it for someone. It would be that kind of thing, like, why are you doing this? It's taking responsibility for other people's stuff. So then to suddenly be expected to know how to ask somebody else, like, well, who?
Yeah.
Who's that?
First
then?
of all, that's the first question for you.
Yeah, and I know women bemoan that maybe the parents do well. We've got loads of different problems. We've got arguably that our parents' generation, just didn't talk about it. Like, nope, we don't talk about this. But I also have a theory that maybe they didn't experience it the way we did because society was so different then.
Yeah.
There weren't as many women in high-powered positions or running businesses or having the opportunity to do creative things. There wasn't a lot of choice to be made. so I'm not entirely sure that our parents' generation were just deliberately being bloody minded in
And
not
I think,
talking to
and,
us.
and I think maybe actually that is what is quite difficult for women who are trying to make themselves known in these roles that weren't made for them. And things like menopause and giving birth isn't considered in the business systems that have been generated originally for men, because that's not something that they needed to do, and it ends up being on us. We're weaker, we're not acceptable for these roles, but it's like actually these systems haven't been made for us, so it's automatically going to be harder for us to exist in these spaces that aren't built for us.
No, they aren't, and
but
they
we
never
still
were.
try.
And I think that's, it's our gift to be flexible and adaptable, but we get punished for it. We get punished ultimately for not, we don't make enough waves. I get frustrated. I talk to, say, a CEO. You think, okay, we're in here, we're good to go because it's the CEO, or someone, or a very senior manager or director. And you think, great, here's a woman who can do something. But they do exactly the same thing as a woman at any level. And they go, oh, no. They don't want to rock the boat. Because if they rock the boat, if they suggest that maybe, just maybe, this structure is not suited to them and we could change it, they're afraid that they will be pushed out, ignored, invalidated, undermined. And so they don't do it.
And it's so tricky, isn't it? Because it's like it then makes you not be able to talk out about your feelings and what you are experiencing. And I think to go back to like menopause as well, like it's one of these things that you only experience after you like are a certain age, and at that age then it's difficult to communicate what it is you're going through, because not a lot of people who are in these working industries can relate to you. So you're almost, I can only, as I can imagine, is then having these conversations on your own, and you're not surrounded by loads of other people who can relate to what you're going through, right?
Yeah, and I think that's how a lot of women would also see that. And as ever, I'm kind of going, yeah, but there's another thing here.
Mm-hmm.
Because what bothers me is, okay, I see that women are having that conversation now. It's now in the public agenda. And HRT may actually end up being prescribed for many women. It's still not suitable for every woman, I hasten to add.
And what is that? I don't actually know what that is.
Hormone replacement therapy.
Okay.
It is not appropriate for every woman, and not every woman wants it, and it doesn't solve every potential menopause problem. But it's a step in the right direction, because for most women that go to their GPs, they know nothing about menopause. They give them the wrong things, they give them nothing, they give them bad advice, they misdiagnose. So it is a major step in the right direction. So I'm not demeaning that in any way.
Yeah, of course, but at the same time, I suppose what you're saying as well, then it's then that thing of, if you've then been, I mean, this is just come into my head just now, but if you've then been prescribed that and it's not working for you, you then again feel like you're the problem, instead of the society that isn't supporting your needs and what you need.
I think there's that as well. And I suppose I'm perhaps at the moment a little tunnel focused on the workplace and education, because what bothers me about, we need to talk about it, or we need to have it validated in some way. This is what we're going through. We need this to normalize this. I get all of that. But there's a little piece of me that says, yeah, but we also kind of allowing ourselves to be sold into the traditional structure of, here's a marginalized group. Here are these people who we need to treat them in a certain way. You know how like the Paralympics, so the people with missing limbs and mental health difficulties are
Mm-hmm.
trying to demonstrate, like, stop treating us differently.
Yeah,
Stop
it's so
doing
true.
that.
It's so true.
And I'm concerned that what we're doing is we're just creating another place where we can be treated differently, and it doesn't challenge
Yeah,
the status quo, which says what you have.
100%.
Yeah, like if a man said, I want to reduce my hours because I don't know, because I'm learning to fly the helicopter. I don't know. Wait, why? I want to work 4 hours a week in 4 hours a week. Yeah, that would be good. 4 days a week instead of 5. If a man had that conversation, I would lay money on the fact that he would not be asked to step down a level. I could have this wrong, but I
Yeah,
doubt you'd have the same
yeah.
pushback. And that's what bothers me, that I think, I don't, in my view, had I still been in the corporate world then, I would want people to understand without me having to actually spell it out. For example, so here's a symptom. Okay, I'm going to freak some people out here. A symptom that I experience, and a lot of women do, of before your periods stop, they do the opposite. For many women, they just become like you're going to lose your entire blood flow in 1 hour.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you can't, like, I used to, sorry about this for anyone that's getting,
No, but I think this is what's good to be, because when there becomes a stigma around these things, and that's when these things aren't discussed. Like, it's our body's natural, like, reactions. I don't think we should need to apologize for that. So
I know, but we do, because of the structures of
yeah,
the way meetings are set up, the way business is structured. It's, and we're going, oh, I need to drive 5 hours here, I need to get on this train, I need to be in this meeting for 3 hours, need to do this presentation for 45 minutes, need to blah 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 blah, and then you go, oh, because I can't leave the house for more than 20 minutes because I've got every kind of padded protection I could possibly have, and that won't last more than 20 minutes. And that's what I went through, and fortunately I wasn't working for someone else, and I remember thinking, my God, thank goodness I'm not still in that situation. So can you imagine feeling like you're a high-powered woman and someone says you've got to go and stand on that stage and deliver a presentation to 1,000 people, and that's a TED talk or whatever it is, big corporate event, a big pitch meeting, and you go, actually, could we change the date? Or it's like, what do you do? People just don't get it. They don't get it.
But it is exactly that thing, that all these things, and even like being able to, like, as women, having all those hormones and all those similar kind of things that happen when you're pregnant, but you're still expected to work. How many months is it? But it's something that, like, these systems, and it's not been by choice, it's just been the way that society was structured, that the woman stays at home and the man goes to work. But things are changing now, but the systems and the structures aren't. And I think that's so right in what you're saying, is like, that's what's not, these are the conversations that aren't being had. It's about employing women in engineering, or employing women here, and the systems that were made for men, because men, why on earth, in a system that was made like for men, it's only natural for them just to be thinking about their own experience in that place, because, and then for years and years that's how it's developed, because like that's just the people that were there and turning up for the jobs. So like, I think it's one of these things that obviously, like, it's not men's fault, that's just been the way that it was, but now it's not being adapted, and there's not been those spaces, and there's not been the room made for things that happen naturally, and the space to be like, this is normal, and the space to be like heard, and it not like, and being able to talk about these things without needing to try and cover it up and try and like act in these ways that like act like normal when you've got all these hormones running through your body from being pregnant, or you're going through menopause, and still expected to show up in the exact same way that you were, when things like loss, like for that humans experience, things like loss, there's things like grievance leave that's put in place, and these systems are put in place because we know how, because we can relate to it when we lost someone, how that feels. But I suppose if it's something that you don't experience and it's not being spoken about openly, how are men meant to know? And even like younger women meant to know that this is what happens when this is something that you've never experienced until you're there, and then you become passionate about it because it's an issue that's affecting you, and you're like, why has no one done anything about this? But it's that thing, like, as a woman, you feel lucky to be in that role, or you feel like you need to earn your space to be in that role, so you don't want to start talking about these things or these issues because you're just going to be a problem solver, and you need to try and work harder to be there, to be like, I can do this, don't put me down, instead of being like, actually, this system isn't made for me and I still show up, and the things that happen naturally to our bodies are not accounted for.
Yeah. I actually, I was listening to something earlier today and I can't remember what it was. Sorry. Otherwise, I'd tell you. And it was talking about how, I wish I could remember. I don't know the company reference, but it was a woman in Europe, so not in this country. She was working in a European company, and she had to adjust her hours for personal reasons, like, you know, stuff was happening. I can't remember what it was, whether it was menopause or childcare or just parental care, because that's another one.
Yep.
Yeah. But her company had, I think, made her a like they'd awarded her a bonus because they actually evaluated and gave her extra credit for the fact that she was performing despite the fact, you know, at a high level, despite the fact she wasn't, you know, she was hampered, arguably, by these other factors. So they actually kind of weighted the performance in her favour because of it, because they recognised, oh, Christ, actually, that's bloody hard. Let's
and then how much better does that then affect your mental health? How much better does that build your relationship with that company, because your needs, your natural human needs, are being met? Yeah. Now, do you know, and I'm not like, this is just purely on conversational basis that I've learned this information, so if it's wrong, then it's wrong. But my friend, one of my best friends, he's from Singapore, and what he told me was, in Singapore, men go into the army or the national services for was it 18 months, because there's the exact reason, hi David, the exact reason that women that happens is because women normally have 2 children, or they have 1 child, and that 9 months is, and then 9 months off or whatever it is. I'm not exactly sure on the dates, but the main thing is that they've built up their system so that after a woman has gone, women start ahead, in the industries in which they work in. So there's that time available for them to take that time off to have their baby, and the time that is needed, because the man doesn't need that time for the body to recover. So that's why they go into the army or the national services, whatever they call it, for that amount of time. So like, their whole structure is taking that into consideration and does that to benefit equally men and women, because men are technically at a disadvantage, but they're learning new skills, like from being in the army, and then when the woman comes back, they're at the same level in their companies and the jobs that they have. And I just think it's such a more productive way to start building our societies around the natural needs, instead of trying to make ourselves fit into environments that aren't meant for the natural things that happen in our body. And I think another example of that is business is built around like masculine energy, right, and natural the way that it is. And there's that thing as well, that men run on testosterone, their hormones run on testosterone, like most of us know that, and women run on estrogen. So like, for that to be a whole conversation as well, like, it's then not seen as weak to be angry, but it's still just as an emotion, like getting upset, you're losing your composure, getting angry. But if you get angry in the business world, it's almost like they're powerful. But if you express the same emotion as a man, woman, or someone that doesn't even identify as a gender, it doesn't really matter, but it's still just an emotion. Like, because obviously there's certain men that won't do well in business because they seem more effeminate, but actually it doesn't mean they're bad at the job. like expressing their emotion in different ways, and then we start favoring different emotions and not accepting, sometimes just in general life as well, accepting the sad emotions that we experience. We need to feel happy, we need to feel happy. And it goes back to like what you've been discussing about menopause. We don't give ourselves that space to feel how we're feeling. We feel that we shouldn't be feeling like this, we should be feeling like that. We don't allow ourselves that space just to be and just to like sit and like be. We're constantly trying to aim and do, but we're human beings, not human doings.
Yeah, well, yeah, good phrase. That's right, not human doings. And while you were saying that, I was just reminded of something that came up the other day, and I don't know if some people will watch the tennis and other people will have no idea about it.
Yeah.
But, and I always get her name right. Emma Raducanu. It's Raducanu. Do you know who I'm talking about? She just won the US Open tennis.
Okay.
And I think she's 17 or 18 years old.
Wow.
And, yeah, so she's done this phenomenal thing. And actually in the final were two teenagers. One was Canadian, one was English. And their tennis was outstanding. I mean, it was mesmerizing. If you're into tennis, it was so, so good. And when they're awarding, so at the end of it, if you ever watch tennis, you'll see that what happens is, you get the sponsors and you have to sit and listen to them going blah, 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 before they give the trophy to the winners. And I thought, because one of the things that was commented on by the man who was doing the speech that was handing out the awards was how these two women had transformed, women's tennis. And the thing he mentioned was their smiles. And I thought, you would never, ever mention how men's smiles had lit up a tournament. I mean,
yeah.
Yes, okay, it's lovely, but still, it doesn't matter how successful you become,
yeah,
how talented, how capable, how dedicated.
Yeah.
People still want you to smile. And
that's such a good point, I literally, actually, so funny you said that tennis. I literally just seen this post. I can't remember any of the names because I don't watch tennis, but I know Andy Murray, obviously.
Yeah.
Watch,
Yeah. Yeah.
So the comment, he said, "Oh, it's so amazing! You've won 2 gold medals. You made history or whatever." And he then mentioned the 2 women that, Serena, what's her name?
Serena Williams.
Yeah. I know her. Yeah. Serena Williams. Yeah, she and her sister. And he's like, "You've made history." And the next comment was, actually, like, do you not remember that they did that? I'm pretty sure twice in the 1 year or whatever it was. Like, don't make out as if I'm this big man shot. It's the first time that's ever happened. But you're not, just because he's the first man to do it. It's like you're not acknowledging the women that have done that. And he called it out like that. I'm not sure if he actually called it out or if it was like someone just making that point that should have been the conversation. But it was on the female lead, actually. It was their Instagram that I seen it on. And it's just like, it's so true, like the credit. And the thing is, it's just, this isn't just a thing that's women. And I like to try and like have that conversation as well, because it's just marginalized communities. It's the exact same thing, like when it's Black people, when it's people from the LGBTQ communities, going back to what we were talking about before, about it being people that have got a limb difference. Like, they are just as able, and disabled people being called like unable, but they are able, sometimes more able at other things than like typical able people. But it's just the words that we use are so ableist, or they're so like, like pro-white or pro, like, what's the word for straight, that's the actual word for it, like man and women relationships. I'm so bad when it comes to all the
heterosexual.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Not homo. Yeah. I didn't want to get that wrong. That would just be awkward. But yeah, like, like all these things, it's like the marginalized communities that actually aren't even marginalized. It's just again, these terminologies that we use to communicate these things. But like, it's across the board. It's like, if you don't fit in these boxes the way that you should, then this is how you're going to be treated. And it's mad. I'm going to go put this light on. But like, it's just like, but I think that's what's so amazing, like when we can come together and we can communicate these things, because we can have a conversation, and then at least, if nothing else, at least people become more aware of them. So then as awareness grows, so can changes gradually, I guess.
Well, no, I think what you're doing is really powerful, and if it starts anywhere, it's great. It seems to me that women who are creative, who are artists in some shape or form, whether that be in writing or painting or some other creative form, you know, there's craftivism too. I love that.
Craftivism, what's that?
Craftivism. Oh, that's when women they either knit or crochet or stitch.
Okay.
And they leave, you know, there might be slightly political things that they'll leave, but they're just so lovely little items, and they just kind of, rather than graffiti and posters, they might just sort of post them on trees, for example, or on railings. And so they're making a political point, but they're doing it in a very gentle way using craft, so they call it craftivism.
Okay, like, okay, got it. I'm with you.
Yeah, and there, I know there's a hashtag. In fact, I think there's an account called craftivism, so on Instagram. So I think it's wonderful, because in a way you can express things as an artist that challenge, in a way that perhaps people that are feeling confined by the straight lines and structures of corporate life and my white middle class male dominated business can't or don't feel enabled or don't know how to. And so I think it's wonderful what you're doing. I think it's well, it is wonderful. I think it's sad that it should be like you're kind of carrying quite a lot on your shoulders, but hey, I'm with you.
But I think that's what you start to realize, like, by having these conversations. And also, like, I think when you again identify with the boxes that are against the structure, then it becomes like a war. And you know what, this is what I realized, like, by having these conversations in this way through the art. See, when I had the exhibition in London, like, when people came into the room, they automatically stood beside me because they're looking at the painting. So you're not having a conversation like this, so you're discussing the art. So then almost you're coming together and you're on the same side. And by communicating like that, it changes your body language, because it stops it from being like, you're wrong. It's like, okay, well, you might see it like this, but if you look at how the women's portrayed this story like that, and then, like, it's such a better way to have a conversation. Because, like, I think so often we look at these things like, if your views are this, then there's the opposition of this. But actually, like, this is why I always try and come back to is we're all human beings, and we all experience the same feelings of discomfort, of upset. Obviously, when it comes to extremes, like extreme things that people experience, I'm not talking about that. And also at the same time, everything is due to have its validation, and everyone's due to have their validation. And I'm not taking anything away from people that have experienced extreme things. But on a general basis, as humans, we experience the same emotions. And if the gender roles were switched, if the racial things were switched, if actually it wasn't the norm to be heterosexual and it was to be homosexual, we'd all be experiencing the exact same things and the exact same feelings. So it's not because of who we are that makes us weak or makes it vulnerable. It's because of the way that the world has been made in an ideal for certain people. And, like, I think that's the conversations that we should be having, instead of putting everyone in boxes, and actually being like, if you were in my position, you would feel the same way, because your hormones would generate themselves in the same way. And I think it's just such a nicer way to look at it, instead of us and them. If we all just had conversations of being human, then actually, like, we can start to relate to one another, instead of like, you can't understand what I'm going through. Well, how about we have a conversation and try and help me understand? Because if I understand, then my feelings and my emotions are then more aligned with yours, and then I'll be more passionate about what you're talking about as well, because I'll understand those feelings and then I'll want to help. Whereas we don't want to help if something seems so far away or something doesn't seem to affect us. And just now, like, I'm having these interviews with women in Russia and Belarus, because the suppression that goes on there is awful, and it was the most amazing experience. I had a Russian translator speaking to me with this woman that was in hi Diana with this woman that was who only spoke Russian, and I was like, this is amazing, like, we're now breaking down language barriers here. This is powerful, because that's another thing that separates us. And what you realize is, like, if I went out in the street, I'd think I'd have nothing in common with this woman, and there's a lot of things that she'd experienced that I haven't, but I can still relate to what she's going through because I've listened. Like, because again, there's certain things that I can relate to with that, and what she's been going through to understand. And then when we can start communicating like that, then, like, they don't seem so far away. And no woman's free and no person's free if another human being isn't free in another country. But again, we can't take on the weight of the world on our shoulders, and it is too much. So we use that as a method to, you know, like, to choose what we're going to engage in and what we're not going to engage in. But if we look at it in that way, then we can see that that's, and notice that's what we're doing, instead of, I don't want to know and I don't care. But notice it's different doing, no, I don't want to know and I don't care, instead of, I know that's going on there, but I need to protect my own energy and I need to protect myself just now to do what I need to do. Like, that's a different conversation, but we end up thinking, no, it doesn't affect me. But it does affect you. Everything that's going on in the world affects us all. Just because we've been privileged enough to be in the environments that we are, look a certain way, like, be born in a specific gender, all these things doesn't mean that it doesn't affect who we are as humans, because there's other people experiencing it, right?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, you're so wise for your years. But I think the other thing that's really powerful about this project that you've created, and the way you're doing it, is, as you say, so you, even though this is art, a visual art, I love the fact that you call it Voice of Women. So you're talking to the auditory sense of,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
this is
true.
about
I didn't think of it
voices,
like that.
and you're cutting through, even though, well, in fact, not even though, because it's visual as well, you're cutting through how conversations about women, for women, by women, often get dominated by what they look like, because the way you've created the art is to reveal some of them, but it's nothing to do with, you know, whether they are typically beautiful, whether they've had their hair done, whether they've had their makeup done, whether they're wearing a nice outfit.
Yeah.
And so even if, and you know, partly because this is the era you've grown up in, you're using a medium that is accessible to so many people on at first sight, you know, at first glance, it's a fairly superficial, it's like, oh, those are pretty pictures. But
Right.
because people will like your pretty pictures, then at least you've got a better opportunity to draw them into something deeper.
Yeah.
So I think it's bloody inspired.
Thank you so much. I think that is a great place to leave our life, because otherwise there's so many things we could just talk about and go, because even when you're talking now, there's so many other things that then keep coming into my head, but otherwise, sorry, we'll be here all night.
Yeah.
But honestly, thank you so much for, like, sharing your energy with me, and, like, just actually answering me when I reached out to you, because that's how it all begins. And tell me your all your books and all these things,
Oh gosh, all
and your
my
coaching
books.
and all this.
All my books.
Yeah, you're a busy woman.
Well, it kind of looks like it sometimes, but they don't all happen at once. So the best way, I mean, if people obviously can find me on Instagram, and on my bio will be a link to Linktree, and if you're not familiar with it, it's linktr.ee, and it's / menopause anxiety, and that's got links to all kinds of things that I'm into and different places I'm appearing. The book, if you do, there's a couple of books. There's one that's not yet to be published but can be pre-ordered, and that's a book actually about mental health leadership in secondary schools. So slightly different, but actually it's the same underpinning message. So if you did a search on my name, which is Shirley Billson with 2 L's, on Amazon, then you'll find that. And also on the same page, there's a completely, well, slightly different. If you like journaling, I just created.
Yeah, I want to check this out because this sounds really good. Your journal.
Yeah, I call it the Journey Book. It's a nice sizable A4. I'm still waiting for my copy. My clients have got theirs. I haven't got mine, but I think it's A4. It's a nice kind of vivid green, and it's called the Journey Book. And there's no date, so it's not like a diary, but it has lots of nice prompts in it that can stimulate you instead of just looking at a blank page and
Yeah.
don't know what to write.
But yeah, definitely check out Shirley's stuff, because I think what's so amazing about you that we didn't even get onto today is that everything that your journey you've been on has been through your experiences, and I think that's what makes all these things you're doing so valuable, because they're like based on life, not based on academics and what should work and numbers. Like, it's based on like the human experience, which has been your experience, which is what I love about it.
Well,
your
yeah,
work that you do.
which is not to say I didn't collect some academic qualifications, but
Of course,
I've not really found them that. Oh, they're not really much use to me, but hey ho, apart from reading and writing.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much love, and obviously, like, we'll be in touch.
Yeah. Have a brilliant evening. Thanks for inviting me. Bye. Bye.